In this video, we're still talking about the ready stance, and I want to discuss some of the most common issues people with the restricted posture have when they're trying to come down to that ready stance. Biggest issue, of course, is controlling the pressure on their feet, of trying to keep that pressure in the center. One problem is getting that pressure too far forward and then falling forward, but most commonly it is having this pressure back in the heels, because in the first stance, it's most common for the people with restricted postures to stand with the shoulders slightly back or way back. So how do we stay off of our heels? Well, we've covered that a lot. You have to bring those shoulders forward. But what happens when you don't bring these shoulders forward? What do you imagine will happen when you begin to lower down into that ready stance by flexing your knees and starting to flex your hips a little bit? What is going to happen to the pressure in your feet? Well, we already said you're starting with your shoulders back a little bit, so the pressure is increased in the heel area. So we've already covered this before. As we lower down into our stance, what happens to the pressure in our feet? It increases. So what happens if I start down into this ready stance from an upright stance and my shoulders are back a little bit, starting out with pressure on my heels? And this happens especially when people are thinking about what they need to do, about how they are to mechanically go down. And it's not just those people with a restricted posture movement impairment. It's also those people who have a natural posture, who have natural movements. When you get someone to think too much about how they are to control their body to do a movement, things start not to happen in the correct sequence. There's over control and under control. There's a mix match. It happens across the board. So here I am standing sideways, show you in an upright stance with the shoulders back just a little bit. Now, if I am focusing on just flexing my knees, then where did I go? Shoulders faded back a little bit as I'm over controlling now my knees, and hips didn't move very much because my thinking is I need to flex my knees, I need to point my knees forward. And then you forget about this up here. Hips and shoulders are held in place while you're thinking, overthinking about just your knees. And if you get carried away with that, you start pushing yourself backwards as you start going down, because the pressure in your heel increases, it's concentrated more and more, pushes you back into that pushing accident. So again, you need to relax this posture to allow the shoulders to come forward first, and then, as we covered in the last video, then focus on just relaxing and collapsing down into the increased pressure you create in your feet. So that pressure that you create in your feet, you have to start developing that sense. Yes, you need to keep reproducing it to feel it, and then you need to take that feeling and make it more. Use these muscles even more to push more pressure there, and you'll find that you're more stable in everything you do when you hold that pressure down to your feet. When you naturally hold that pressure down to your feet, that's your stabilization for your postural control up here. You can get away with all kinds of stuff here, good and bad, as long as you're holding enough pressure down into the floor to stabilize you on the floor. If you're not holding that pressure down into your feet, then you're very light on your feet in a bad way. Then everything you do up here is very erratic and very problematic. Learn how to push that pressure down on your feet. Learn how to keep your feet flat, how to relax your body, and just down you go. Naturally, set the pressure, boom, relax into it, go. That's all this is about. That's the end point of what you want to accomplish. It's going to take quite a while for some of you, not so much for others, but that is the real end point. That's what natural movement is. That's why we don't have to think about it when we have this natural ability, because we learn from when we were a toddler to set the pressure and just let our body relax into that pressure, because that's exactly where our posture needs to be, because the pressure is exactly where it needs to be for the movement we want to do. That's why our movements, our natural movements, are without thought. We don't have to think about it. We just, this is the pressure I need, and we're not even thinking about that. We're just doing it because we've done it ever since we were this high. So please understand that this is where you're going. It's not learning some new technique. It's just reacquainting yourself with yourself from when you had this better ability. So it's imperative that you learn, that you remember many of the things you used to do. The feeling that was associated with them. And you're going to have to kind of back into that. You have to try to get your posture relaxed to reproduce the best you can. Some of those things that you did before, some of those postures of even hitting a ball, swinging, tossing something, moving side to side, dancing in place, whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter. But you have to reconnect with you from when you had these better abilities to reproduce and remember what those pressures were, because that is your common ground. Those feelings, those pressures, that's what you trusted. So all of this is you reconnecting with you, not doing it my way or somebody else's way. You're just learning again who you were back then, what you did, how you did it, what you thought of, what you imagined you were doing, what you associated it with. Can't get any simpler than that. But it also can't get any more complicated than that, because that takes some time to build the confidence of the trust in getting this body to do close to some of those things so you can merge back into some of those. But believe me, if you keep that focus, you'll be ahead of the curve, because then you'll start to get down here and out of here. And that makes a big, big difference. Couple more points. One is, remember, we're hinged in the middle. These core muscles that connect both halves, those muscles connect the independent upper part to the independent lower part. So each one can move as it needs to move without interfering with the movement of the other part. So when you have this guarding or stiffness in your posture, when these shoulders move a little bit, that also moves this down here, and that's not the way we're naturally supposed to function. This moves independent of this, and vice versa. But they're both dependent on each other for their support to be able to do those things independently. So that's another thing you're getting back. You're not just working on the core muscles, just the opposite. Here again, you're doing, for one, total body conditioning, so everything's a little bit stronger and in better shape to be able to do a lot of this stuff again. So everything is able to work better. If these aren't strong enough, you will have a very difficult time trying to control this up here. If these core muscles are weak, this is just flopping around, you will not have any control down here. So you must learn how to push that pressure down into your feet and hold it, even when you're standing up here, because that's what we naturally do. Keeping these muscles working, getting the fear out of here, getting the stiffness out of here, so these muscles can work the way they are naturally designed. Speaking about these down here, the other problem is, and a bigger problem for many people, knees. Remember we talked about the knees with a person with a restricted posture straighten? I'm going to stand sideways here a little bit. Instead of being naturally flexed or even straight with a relaxed posture, they hold them straight and back. They're forcing them back to stand on that bone to help them stabilize. But as you can see, it's not stabilizing, it's destabilizing. So why do they do it? Again, they're trying to take that joint out, that big joint down there, the knee joint. They're trying to take it out. So these muscles that are getting weaker don't have to work so hard to try to control that knee when it's flexed. And when it's flexed, you're standing on muscles. So those weak muscles say, no, I can't support that body. So they lock the knees backwards to stand just on bone. And now it's like they're walking on stilts everywhere. Everything, once these knees start coming back, everything starts to get worse. More stiffness, more fear, more falling, more everything. So the problem in this ready stance with these people that do this, when they're coming back up, they will quickly come up with those knees. And that's a lot of why they tip forward coming up out of the stance. The shoulders are still forward, but the knees are coming up, and see how my body goes forward, tipping me forward. The other thing is when they mix, the shoulders coming up too fast because they're pulling up with their shoulders. They'll do that. The knees will come up and lock quickly, and the shoulders doing the same thing up and back. A double whammy, and boom, back they go. And you'll see that especially too with people when they get up out of a chair and fall right back into it. Knees and shoulders are the two biggest problems with the restrictive posture. Knees that don't want to bend and they just don't want to stay down there, and to keep them flexible naturally is tough. I still have that issue. Again, not as much as I did many years ago, but out there with my therapy playing golf, to try to keep them flexed. Now, if I'm in good shape, well rested, and I'm having a good movement day, they work pretty good. But if it's an off day, then I'm doing some of the same mistakes. But out there in that stance, swinging that club, that's all a very complex movement, which is why I call it and treat it as therapy, because that's exactly what it is. To be able to stay in the stance, to be able to swing that club with the rotation of the body, very complex. So you need to do play things just to test yourself and use it as therapy how do I do this better? But the knee situation, that's going to be with you for a long, long time. So you must gain some better control of them. And speaking to those people with natural ability, you know that when you get stiff, your movements are off. When you have a lot of this fear and the other restrictions that we have with the restricted posture movement permit, it's even worse. Many of you can do much more than you think you can do. Many of you can get more control of your body, your knees, your shoulders and hips, pressure in your feet, much more than you think. But it just takes time. As we go through the third stance, the squatting, with just a continuation of that ready stance, I'm also going to include some little games, some little drills, exercises, if you will, that will help you focus on better control here, better relaxation, and increased pressure in your feet. And they're simple. And what you need for it, you probably already have at home. Nothing that I will be using and nothing that I have used with anybody I've ever worked with has been complex or special. The only thing you need are the walls, a smooth wall that we're going to also show you some things with, basketball or like a 4-square ball, a chair to sit in when you need it, and a nice flat floor, and other little things that you can throw in that are just readily available. Those simple little things will help you in so many ways. You have no idea unless you've already done it. Stick with me. We're going to get to it. We're going to give you some reasons to have better days.